Mustafa İsmet İnönü September 24, 1884 December 25, 1973, was a Turkish general and statesman, who served as the second president of Turkey from November 11, 1938, the day after the death of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, to May 22, 1950, when his Republican People's Party was defeated in Turkey's second free elections. He also served as the first Chief of the General Staff from 1922 to 1924, and as the first Prime Minister after the declaration of the Republic, serving 3 terms, from 1923 to 1924, 1925 to 1937, and 1961 to 1965. As President, he was granted the official title of Milli Şef, National Chief. İsmet İnönü was born in İzmir, Aidin Vilayet to Hacı Reşit, Turkish, Hadʒū, and dʒevrije, Turkish, dʒevrije, later Cevriye Temelli, and was of Kurdish descent on his father's side and of Turkish descent through his mother. Hacı Reşit was retired from the 1st Examinant Department of Legal Affairs Bureau of the War Ministry, Harbiye Nezareti Muhakemat Dairesi Birinci Mümeyyizliği, who was born in Malatya and a member of Kümüroğulları family of Bitlis. Cevriye was a daughter of Müderris, Professor, Hasan Efendi, who was ulema and a member of Turkish family of Razgrad. Due to his father's assignments, the family moved from one city to another. Thus, Ismet completed his primary education in Sivas and graduated Sivas Military Junior High School, Sivas Askerî Rüştiyesi, in 1894. And then he studied at Sivas School for Civil Servants, Sivas Mülkiye İdadisi, for a year. When the 1934 surname law was adopted, Mustafa Kemal gave him a surname delivered from İnönü, where he commanded the forces of Army of Grand National Assembly as the Minister of the Chief of the General Staff. On April 13, 1916, İsmet married Mevhibe, who was a daughter of an Ashraf, of Zizdavi, present-day Svishtof, Zudo Efendi. They had 3 children, Ömer, Erdal and Ozdan, married to Metin Toker. İsmet graduated from the Imperial School of Military Engineering, Mühendis Hanai Barihumayun, in 1903 as gunnery officer, and received his first military assignment in the Ottoman Army. He joined the Committee of Union and Progress. He won his first military victories by suppressing 2 major revolts against the struggling Ottoman Empire, first in Rumeliya and later in Yemen. Citation needed, whose leader was Yahya Muhammad Hamid ed-Din. He served as a military officer during the Balkan Wars on the Ottoman-Bulgarian front. During World War I, he served with the Ottoman military rank of Mirale, arbitrarily the equivalent of colonel or senior colonel, brigadier, and worked under Mustafa Kemal Pasha during his assignments at the Caucasus and Palestine fronts. Turkish War of Independence. After losing the Battle of Megiddo against General Edmund Allenby during the last days of World War I, he went to Constantinople, Istanbul, and was assigned Under-Secretary of the Ministry of War and then General Secretary of the Documentation in the Military Council. After the military occupation of Constantinople on March 16, 1920, he decided to pass to Anatolia for joining the Turkish national movement. He and his Chief of Staff Major Safet Arkan wore soldier uniform and left Maltepe in the evening of March 19, 1920 and arrived at Ankara on April 9, 1920. He was appointed the commander of the Western Front of the Army of the Grand National Assembly, GNA, a position in which he remained during the Turkish War of Independence. He was promoted to the rank of Mirlava, arbitrarily the equivalent of Brigadier General or Major General, the most junior general rank with the title Pasha in the Ottoman and pre-1934 Turkish Army, after winning the First Battle of İnönü, which took place between 9 and January 11, 1921. He also won the subsequent Second Battle of İnönü, which was fought between 26 and March 31, 1921. During the Turkish War of Independence he was also a member of the GNA in Ankara. İnönü was replaced by Mustafa Fevzi Pasha, who was also the Prime Minister and Minister of Defense at the time, as the Chief of Staff of the Army of the GNA after the Turkish forces lost major battles against the advancing Greek army in July 1921, as a result of which the cities of Ankarahisar, Kütahya, and Eskişehir were temporarily lost. He participated as a staff officer, with the rank brigadier general, to the later battles, until the final Turkish victory in September 1922. After the War of Independence was won, İsmet Pasha was appointed as the chief negotiator of the Turkish delegation, both for the Armistice of Mudanya and for the Treaty of Lausanne. The Lausanne Conference convened in late 1922 to settle the terms of a new treaty that would take the place of the Treaty of Sèvres. İnönü became famous for his stubborn resolve in determining Ankara's position as the legitimate, sovereign government of Turkey. After delivering his position, İnönü turned off his hearing aid during the speeches of British Foreign Secretary Lord Curzon. When the secretary had finished, İnönü reiterated his position as if Lord Curzon had never said a word. İnönü later served as the Prime Minister of Turkey for several terms, maintaining the system that Mustafa Kemal had put in place. He acted after every major crisis, such as the rebellion of Sheikh Said or the attempted assassination in Izmir against Mustafa Kemal, to restore peace in the country. Statism in economy. He tried to manage the economy with heavy-handed government intervention, especially after the 1929 economic crisis, by implementing an economic plan inspired by the five-year plan of the Soviet Union. In doing so, he took much private property under government control. Due to his efforts, to this day, more than 70% of land in Turkey is still owned by the state. Desiring a more liberal economic system, Atatürk dissolved the government of İnönü and appointed Celal Bayar, the founder of the first Turkish commercial bank Turkey Bankası, as Prime Minister. National Chief period. President. After the death of Atatürk on November 10, 1938, İnönü was viewed as the most appropriate candidate to succeed him, and was elected the second President of the Republic of Turkey and enjoyed the official title of Milli Şef, i.e. National Chief. World War II broke out in the first year of his presidency, and both the Allies and the Axis pressured İnönü to bring Turkey into the war on their side. The Germans sent Franz von Papen to Ankara in February 1942, while the British sent Hugh Najbul Hugson and the French René Massigli. On April 23, 1939, Turkish Foreign Minister Şükrü Saracoğlu told Najbul Hugson of his nation's fears of Italian claims of the Mediterranean as Mare Nostrum and German control of the Balkans, and suggested an Anglo-Soviet-Turkish alliance as the best way of countering the Axis. In May 1939, during the visit of Maxime Weygand to Turkey, İnönü told the French ambassador René Massigli that he believed that the best way of stopping Germany was an alliance of Turkey, the Soviet Union, France, and Britain, that if such an alliance came into being, the Turks would allow Soviet ground and air forces onto their soil, and that he wanted a major program of French military aid to modernize the Turkish armed forces. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, himself, travelled to Ankara on January 30, 1943 for a conference with President İnönü, to urge Turkey's entry into the war on the Allied side. The signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact on August 23, 1939 led Turkey away from the Allies, as the Turks always believed that it was essential to have the Soviet Union as an ally to counter Germany, and the signing of the German-Soviet Pact undercut completely the assumptions behind Turkish security policy. When Winston Churchill met with İnönü in January 1943, they had met secretly inside a train wagon at the Yeni station near Adana. However, by 4-6 December 1943, İnönü felt confident enough about the outcome of the war, that he met openly with Franklin D. Roosevelt and Winston Churchill at the Second Cairo Conference. Until 1941, both Roosevelt and Churchill thought that Turkey's continuing neutrality would serve the interests of the Allies by blocking the Axis from reaching the strategic oil reserves of the Middle East. But the early victories of the Axis up to the end of 1942 caused Roosevelt and Churchill to re-evaluate a possible Turkish participation in the war on the side of the Allies. Turkey had maintained a decently sized army and air force throughout the war, and Churchill wanted the Turks to open a new front in the Balkans. Roosevelt, on the other hand, still believed that a Turkish attack would be too risky, and an eventual Turkish failure would have disastrous effects for the Allies. NN knew very well the hardships which his country had suffered during decades of incessant war between 1908 and 1922 and was determined to keep Turkey out of another war as long as he could. The young Turkish Republic was still rebuilding, recovering from the losses due to earlier wars, and lacked any modern weapons and the infrastructure to enter a war to be fought along and possibly within its borders. NN based his neutrality policy during the Second World War on the premise that Western Allies and the Soviet Union would sooner or later have a falling out after the war. Thus, NU wanted assurances on financial and military aid for Turkey, as well as a guarantee that the United States and the United Kingdom would stand beside Turkey in the event of a Soviet invasion of the Turkish Straits after the war. The post-war tensions and arguments surrounding the Turkish Straits would come to be known as the Turkish Straits Crisis. The fear of Soviet invasion and Joseph Stalin's unconcealed desire for Soviet military bases in the Turkish Straits eventually caused Turkey to give up its principle of neutrality in foreign relations and join NATO in February 1952. Multi-party period. Under international pressure to transform the country to a democratic state, NN presided over the infamous 1946 elections, in which votes were cast in the open with onlookers able to observe to which party the voters had cast their votes, yet counting of the votes were not open for the public to observe. In 1950, his party lost the first free elections in the Republic's history. The Democrat Party used a slogan, Geldi Ismet, Kesildi Ismet, since Ismet came, fortune was cut, for their election campaigns. NN presided over the peaceful transfer of power to the Democratic Party of Celal Bayar and Adnan Menderes. NN served for 10 years as the leader of the opposition before returning to power as Prime Minister after the 1961 election, held after the military coup d'état in 1960. Although the opposition was imprisoned during the 1961 elections, he still did not win a majority and had to form coalition governments until the 1965 elections. He lost both the 1965 and 1969 general elections to Süleyman Demirel, and then in 1972 he lost his party's leadership race to Bülent Ecevit. Ismet NN was, by the standards of his time, a highly educated man, speaking Arabic, English, French and German in addition to his native Turkish. NN died in 1973. He was interred opposite to Atatürk's mausoleum at Anıtkabir in Ankara and a massive tomb was constructed there. Legacy. NN University and Malatya NN Stadium in Malatya are named after him, as is the NN Stadium in Istanbul, home of the Beşiktaş Football Club.